Today I wanted to share with you guys one of my favorite cake recipes. It's the iconic and famous Ukrainian Kieevski cake. It's a really simple recipe of sponge cake, baked meringue, and then it's all topped with a dulce de leche frosting. I'm gonna break this recipe down into 3 different parts just to make it super easy. I'm gonna run through the ingredients and we'll get started. For the first part, we need to make our baked meringue, and I recommend either preparing it overnight or the day before. That way you don't have to wait on it while it's baking in the oven. And for the meringue, we're gonna need 6 large egg whites and we're gonna need 1/3 cup sugar. I'm gonna add that into my mixer and I'll show you just how easy it is to make. So we just need to separate our egg whites from our egg yolks. I'm going to add my egg whites into my mixing bowl along with my 3/4 cup white granulated sugar. And we're going to use a whisk attachment. We want to whisk these eggs on high speed until they're stiff and glossy. So while we're preparing our egg whites, we need to prepare a sheet of parchment paper, and we're going to draw 2 circles on it. We're going to use an 8-inch pan, and we're just going to draw an outline just like that. And one more. And this is going to be the outline that we use to pipe our meringue onto. Okay? And now I'm going to take my baking sheet and I'm going to turn the paper upside down just so that pen doesn't get on your meringue. I also need a large pastry bag tipped with a star tip, or you can just use a simple circle one as well. My meringue is all done and you can see the consistency of it. That's just the way we want it to be. Now we're going to transfer it into that pastry bag that we had prepared. And we're going to start piping the meringue onto our parchment paper. Now we're going to pipe the meringue along the guides that we drew on the back of the parchment paper. We want it about 1 inch thick, and we're just going to make a large circle and then fill it into the inside as well, just like this. I'm just going to spread all the extra over the top with a spatula, and you want to create just a nice even layer. This meringue needs to be baked in the oven at 175 degrees, and it's going to bake for about 8 hours. And you want to keep the door to the oven closed, otherwise the meringue is going to crack on the top. And I like to do this overnight. I just prepare it right before I go to sleep, just put it in the oven, and it's ready the next morning. This is what your meringue should look like once it's done. If you want to check the doneness, just tap on it and it should have a hollow sound. That's perfect. These are ready to be used in our cake. Once your baked meringue is all done, you're ready for the second step. For part 2, we're going to make our sponge cake. We're going to need to line 2 8-inch pans with some parchment paper and then set that aside, and then we're going to need to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. Now for the cake batter, we're going to need 6 large eggs, 3/4 cup of sugar, we're going to need 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and then 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to add 6 eggs and my 3/4 cup sugar into my mixer bowl, and we're going to beat this on high speed until the egg batter is really thick and pale. It's going to be almost white in color. So this is what our cake batter should look like. It's thick and it's pale and it's almost white in color, and that's when you know that you're ready to add your flour. Now we're going to need 1 cup of flour, and we're going to need 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and I'm actually going to combine them together, and then we're going to carefully whisk this mixture into the eggs. Give that a quick stir, and then I just put everything into a fine mesh strainer, and we're just going to carefully whisk a little bit at a time. And then we're going to fold after each addition until it's completely combined. You don't want to add your flour too fast because then you're going to have a lot of clumps in your cake batter. Now I'm going to divide my cake batter evenly between the 2 cake pans, and then we're going to bake this in our preheated oven at 350 degrees until the tops of the cakes are golden brown. My sponge cakes just came out of the oven. I'm just going to run a knife along the edge here. I'm going to loosen the cake from the pan. I'm going to invert them onto a cooling rack, and these need to cool completely before we frost them. And now for the third and final part. I have my sponge cake layers cooling, and now we can make the dulce de leche frosting. I have 1 cup of butter that I've softened at room temperature. We're also going to need a 14-ounce can of dulce de leche. And now this is caramelized sweetened condensed milk. And I get this at the International Food aisle in Safeway. You can also pick it up at your local Russian store. And we're also going to need 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. I'm going to transfer the butter into a large mixing bowl. We're also going to transfer our dulce de leche. And we're going to whisk this on high speed until it's smooth and creamy. And I'm also going to need to add 1 tablespoon of our cocoa powder. And this is what your frosting should look like when it's all done. And now we're ready to frost our cake. One last thing that we need for our cake is about a cup of hazelnuts, and I've placed them into a food processor, and I've just pulsed them just for a few seconds so that the nuts get broken down, and you'll have a little bit bigger pieces and smaller pieces, and this is going to act as one of our fillers. And now we're ready to decorate. I have a nice cake platter here that I'm going to use to place my cake onto, and I also have a nice long flat spatula I'm going to use to frost my cake with. So I'm going to place about a tablespoon of frosting on the bottom of my cake platter, just like that. And then I'm going to place my first layer of sponge cake on top. And that little dollop there is going to help keep the cake in place. Just like that. All right. We're going to spread a thin layer of frosting. And now I'm going to sprinkle some of those chopped nuts on top. Now we're going to top with our first meringue layer. For our meringue layer, we're going to add another layer of frosting. And you can see that the meringue layer might be a little bit larger than the sponge cake. Don't worry about that. We're going to trim that up before we frost the outside of the cake. I'll place a little bit more of my chopped nuts on top. I'm going to top it with 1 more sponge cake layer. And some more frosting. And I'm going to top with our last sheet of meringue. Now I'm going around the edge of the cake, and I'm just trimming down the meringue where it's just a little bit larger than the sponge cake with the bread knife, just to even it out. It'll make it a little bit easier for us to frost the cake. And now we can start frosting the outside of our cake. And we're just going to spread this frosting generously first on the top, and then we're going to move down to the sides. I'm just going around the edges, and I'm just straightening them out with this long spatula, and this is the best tool for cake decorating. It really makes the process really easy. Then we just want to smooth out the top. Now here's another optional decorating technique, and I'm just pressing slivered almonds into the side of the cake. This is a little bit time consuming, but the end result is really beautiful. This classic and iconic Kieevski cake just turned out absolutely stunning. And you can see all the cake layers inside, the meringue, the sponge, the frosting. It makes for an elegant cake, and it's perfect to serve to your dinner guests when you have a special get together. And I especially love the crunchy meringue layer in here. This is perfect. Now I just need a cup of hot tea to finish off this cake slice. Meanwhile, you guys can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you'll get updates every single time I post new videos.